This is some of the craziest stuff that I have ever seen. And you know, I learned about this yesterday when I was reading to y'all from Killing Cancer Not People, the little section about this gentleman right here, Royal Raymond Rife. Personally, I think it's a tragedy that people don't know who this guy is. And, you know, there's a lot of people like that in history. Good morning, Rodgar. Good to see you, brother. I'm doing fantastic, man. Doing fantastic. Got a really, really interesting subject this morning. And hopefully Sam Tran's going to be jumping in here with us sometime during the show, and he can kind of explain what's going on. But what I'm going to do today is I want to read to you guys this story right here of this gentleman, Royal Raymond Rife. Very interesting story about this guy. And, you know, I posted up about this last night, and I said, you know, it makes my heart hurt. Hurt makes my heart cry. Just thinking about this guy and what you know, what was done to him. You know, it's just, it's amazing how corrupt money and power can make people. And, you know, it's so interesting to me how people can be so cruel that they care more about money than they care about anything else, you know. And the hidden side of that equation is that, you know, as long as this private company called the Federal Reserve Corporation is able to continue destroying the value of our money, well, guess what? Everybody needs more money. And that makes, you know, that adds added pressure to the whole situation. But this gentleman, Royal Raymond Rife, was an incredible scientist who discovered how to destroy cancer cells, viruses, bacteria with electricity, essentially with electricity, with the perfect frequency. And I'm going to read you his story here, and then afterwards I've got a couple of videos ready to go that I'm going to show you these videos, a little bit of them. Not going to show you the whole thing. The one's like 45 minutes long, and the other one is just a short one. But it's pretty interesting looking at these videos. And I was up till like 1 o'clock this morning, 1:30 this morning, watching these videos. It was just so fascinating to me, and I thought it would be a fun thing to show you guys today on the Kong Family Show, because everybody knows we are the Kong Family. We're here to change the world, and you know, changing the world isn't all just about Kong's water. You know, there's you know, like as Dr. Michael has said, is it the only thing? No, but it's most of it. It's 75% of the equation. And, you know, so things like this are the other 25%, and who knows, you know, this is so interesting when you think about this technology, you guys. Think about how this could be used, you know, because if this technology could be used to go down and attack a single cell under a microscope, imagine the possibility of being able to amp it up or whatever and use it on people, you know. It's hard to think about that, but, you know, it's just amazing how so many technologies that get out there that the evil people in this world want to figure out a way to utilize it for evil purposes. And so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and move on. I want to read this to you. I hope you guys don't mind this, but it's probably not really very readable from your screens. And I got it up here on my big screen so I can read it to you. But good morning, Marilyn. This is going to blow your mind right here, honey. This is just absolutely crazy stuff right here. So this gentleman that you're seeing, this by that crazy funky looking microscope, that's Royal Raymond Rife. So I'm going to begin here. Imagine for a moment that you have spent more than 2 decades in painfully laborious research, that you have discovered an incredibly simple electronic approach to curing literally every disease on the planet caused by viruses and bacteria. Indeed, it is a discovery that would end the pain and suffering of countless millions and change life on Earth forever. Certainly, the medical world would rush to embrace you with every imaginable accolade and financial reward imaginable. You would think so, wouldn't you? Unfortunately, Arguably, the greatest medical genius in all recorded history suffered a fate literally the opposite of the foregoing logical scenario. In fact, the history of medicine is replete with stories of genius betrayed by backward thought and jealousy, but most pathetically by greed and money. In the 19th century, Semmelweis struggled mightily to convince surgeons that it was a good idea to sterilize their instruments and use sterile surgical procedures. Pasteur was ridiculed for years for his theory that germs could cause disease. Scores of other medical visionaries went through hell for simply challenging the medical status quo of the day, including such legends as Röntgen and his X-rays, Morton for promoting the absurd idea of anesthesia, Harvey for his theory of circulation of blood, and many others in recent decades, including W.F. Koch, Revisi, Brzezinski, Nassans, Priori, Livingston, Wheeler, and Hoxie. Orthodox big money medicine resents and seeks to neutralize and or destroy those who challenge its beliefs. Often the visionary who challenges it pays a heavy price for his hearsay. So, you have just discovered a new therapy which can eradicate any microbial disease, but so far, you and your amazing cure aren't very popular. What do you do next? Well, certainly the research foundations and teaching institutions would welcome your news of your astounding discovery. Won't they be thrilled to learn you have a cure for the very same diseases they are receiving hundreds of millions of dollars per year to investigate? Maybe not. If it means the end of the gravy train, these people have mortgages to pay and families to support. On second thought, forget the research foundations. Perhaps you should take your discovery to the pharmaceutical industry. Certainly it would be of great interest to those protectors of humanity, right? But remember, you have developed a universal cure which makes drugs obsolete. So the pharmaceutical industry just might be less than thrilled to hear about your work. In fact, the big shots might even make it certain that your human disease-ending technology never sees the light of day by preventing it from becoming licensed by the regulatory agencies. Now, assuming your amazing cure is an electronic instrument, the only cost of using it is electricity, and it is absolutely harmless to patients who can recover without losing their hair, the family home, and their life savings. So with your technology, there is no longer any reason for people with cancer to pay over $300,000 per patient to become deathly ill from chemotherapy, radiation treatments, and mutilation of surgery. It sounds like you won't find many friends and support among practicing oncologists, radiologists, and surgeons, doesn't it? You might try the hospitals and big clinics, but how thrilled are they going to be about a therapy administered in any doctor's office which reverses illness before the patient has to be hospitalized? Thank you. The staffs of these institutions will essentially be out of work. Well then, how about insurance companies? Surely they would be delighted to save the expense of hospitalization, at least the companies which haven't invested in hospitals, where the staff is now sitting around waiting for someone to break a leg or be in a car accident, and the ones who don't lose policyholders as a result of your invention, and the companies which aren't trying to divest their pharmaceutical stock. Oh well, forget the insurance companies too. It looks like you just might have a little problem with the medical establishment. No? Probably the only friends you'll have will be the patients and those progressive doctors who see change as an opportunity rather than a threat to their established money-making monopoly. Those people will love you, but they don't call the shots. Good morning, Mark. Hey, you know what? I'd really love to have you on the show sometime so you can talk about that. If you're using this technology, I would really love to get you on the show and have you explain what this is all about to people. You know, this article does a pretty decent job, but I want to go deeper into this guy because this is literally a modern hero, or, you know, a hero that nobody knows about. So anyway, they don't call the shots. What follows now is the story of exactly such a sensational therapy and what happened to it. In one of the blackest episodes in recorded history, this remarkable electronic therapy was sabotaged and buried by a ruthless group of men. It has reemerged in the underground medical alternative health world only since the mid-1980s. This is the story of Royal Raymond Rife and his fabulous discoveries in electronic instruments. If you have never heard of Rife before, prepare to be angered and incredulous at what this great man achieved for all of us, only to have it practically driven from the face of the planet. But reserve your final judgment and decision until after you have read this. Of course, some may regard this as just an amusing piece of fiction. However, for those who are willing to do some investigating on their own, there will be mentioned several highly respected doctors and medical authorities who worked with Rife, as well as some of the remarkable technical aspects of his creation. However, in the final analysis, the only real way to determine if such a revolutionary therapy exists is to experience it yourself. The medical literature is full of rigged, double-blind clinical research tests, the results of which are often determined in advance by the vested corporate interests involved. If the FDA, Fraud and Death Administration, and other regulatory and licensing procedures and guidelines are observed, it is your privilege to experiment with this harmless therapy. So let's now turn to the story of the most amazing medical pioneer of our century. Royal Raymond Rife was a brilliant scientist born in 1888 and died in 1971. After studying at Johns Hopkins, Rife developed technology which is still commonly used today in fields of optics, electronics, radiochemistry, biochemistry, ballistics, and aviation. It is a fair statement that Rife practically developed bioelectric medicine himself. He received 14 major awards and honors and was given an honorary doctorate by the University of Heidelberg for his work. During the 66 years that Rife spent designing and building medical instruments, he worked for Zeiss Optics, the US government, and several private benefactors. Most notable was millionaire Henry Timken of Timken roller bearing fame. Because Rife was self-educated in so many different fields, he intuitively looked for his answers in areas beyond the rigid scientific structure of his day. He had also mastered so many different disciplines that he literally had at his intellectual disposal the skills and knowledge of an entire team of scientists and technicians from a number of different scientific fields. So whenever new technology was needed to perform a new task, Rife simply invented and then built it himself. Crazy. Rife's inventions include heterodyning ultraviolet microscope, a micro dissector, and a micro manipulator. When you thoroughly understand Rife's achievements, you may well decide that he has the most gifted, versatile scientific mind in human history. By 1920, Rife had finished building the world's first virus microscope. By 1933, he had perfected that technology and constructed the incredibly complex universal microscope, which had nearly 6,000 different parts and was capable of magnifying objects 60,000 times their normal size. With this incredible microscope, Rife became the first human being to actually see a live virus. And until quite recently, the universal microscope was the only one which was able to view live viruses. Modern electron microscopes instantly kill everything beneath them, viewing only the mummified remains and debris. What the Rife microscope can see is the bustling activity of living viruses as they change form to accommodate changes in environment, replicate rapidly in response to carcinogens, and transform normal cells into tumor cells. But how was Rife able to accomplish this in an age when electronics and medicine were still just evolving? Here are a few technical details to placate the skeptics. Rife painstakingly identified the individual spectroscopic signature of each microbe using a slit spectroscope attachment. Then he slowly rotated block quartz prisms to focus light of a single wavelength upon the microorganism he was examining. This wavelength was selected because it resonated with the spectroscopic signature frequency of the microbe, based on the now established fact that every molecule oscillates at its own distinct frequency. You know, I'm always telling people, you guys, real quick break here, that, you know, the human body is a machine that runs on electricity and hydrogen, that it, you know, runs on 120 millivolts of electricity and hydrogen. And, you know, when you stop and think about this whole concept, we are an electrical being and we are oscillating just like these molecules. And so it's really interesting to think about when you know, as I read this last night, I was just like, wow, this is crazy. Anyway, okay, the atoms that come together to form a molecule are held together in that molecular configuration with a covalent energy bond which both emits and absorbs its own specific electromagnetic frequency. No two species of molecule have the same electromagnetic oscillations or energetic signature. Resonance applies light in the same way two ocean waves intensify each other when they merge together. The result of using resonant wavelength is that microorganisms which are invisible in white light suddenly become visible in a brilliant flash of light when they are exposed to the color frequency that resonates with their own distinct spectroscopic signature. Rife was thus able to see these otherwise invisible organisms and watch them actively invading tissues and cultures. Rife's discovery enabled him to view organisms that no one else could see with ordinary microscopes. More than 75% of the organisms Rife could see with his universal microscope are only visible with ultraviolet light, but ultraviolet light is outside the range of human vision. It is invisible to us. Rife's brilliance allowed him to overcome this limitation by heterodyning, a technique which became popular in early radio broadcasting. He illuminated the microbe, usually a virus or bacteria, with two different wavelengths of the same ultraviolet light frequency, which resonated with the spectral signature of the microbe. These two wavelengths produced interference where they merged. This interference was in effect a third longer wave which fell into the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. This was how Rife made invisible microbes visible without killing them, a feat which today's electron microscopes cannot duplicate. By this time, Rife was so far ahead of his colleagues of the 1930s that they could not comprehend what he was doing without actually traveling to San Diego to Rife's laboratory to look through the virus microscope for themselves, and many did exactly that. One was Virginia Livingston. She eventually moved from New Jersey to Rife's Point Loma, San Diego neighborhood and became a frequent visitor to his lab. Virginia Livingston is now often given the credit for identifying the organism which causes human cancer, beginning with research papers she began publishing in 1948. In reality, Royal Rife had identified the human cancer virus first in 1920. Rife then made over 20,000 unsuccessful attempts to transform normal cells into tumor cells. He finally succeeded when he irradiated the cancer virus, passed it through a cell-catching ultrafine porcelain filter, and injected it into lab animals. Not content to prove this virus would cause one tumor, Rife then created 400 tumors in succession from the same culture. He documented everything with film, photographs, and meticulous records. He named the cancer virus Cryptocytes primordialis. Virginia Livingston in her papers renamed it progenitor cryptocytes. Royal Rife was never even mentioned in her papers. In fact, Rife seldom got credit for his monumental discoveries. He was a quiet, unassuming scientist dedicated to expanding his discoveries rather than to ambition, fame, and glory. His distaste for medical politics, which he could afford to ignore thanks to generous trusts set up by private benefactors, left him at a disadvantage later when powerful forces attacked him. Coupled with the influence of the pharmaceutical industry in purging his papers from medical journals, it is hardly surprising that few have heard of Rife today. I know that I had not heard of him until yesterday. Meanwhile, debate raged between those who had seen viruses changing into different forms beneath Rife's microscopes and those who had not. Those who condemned without investigations, such as the influential Dr. Thomas Rivers, claimed these forms didn't exist. Because his microscope did not reveal them, Rivers argued that there was no logical basis for belief in this theory. Let's see, where did I just, Rivers argued that there was no logical basis for belief in this theory. The same argument is used today in evaluating many other alternative medical treatments. If there is no precedent, then it must not be valid. Nothing can convince a closed mind. Most had never actually looked through the San Diego microscopes. Air travel in the 1930s was uncomfortable, primitive, and rather risky. So the debate about the life cycle of viruses was resolved in favor of those who never saw it. Even modern electron microscopes show frozen images, not the life cycle of viruses in the process. Nevertheless, many scientists and doctors have since confirmed Rife's discovery of the cancer virus and its pleomorphic nature using dark field techniques, the Nassen's microscope, and laboratory experiments. Rife also worked with the top scientists and doctors of his day, who also confirmed or endorsed various areas of his work. They include a whole list of people. I'm not going to read all those off to you. Rife ignored the debate, preferring to concentrate on refining his method of destroying these tiny killer viruses. He used the same principle to kill them, which made them visible: resonance. By increasing the intensity of a frequency which resonated naturally with these microbes, Rife increased their natural oscillations until they distorted and disintegrated from structural stresses. Rife called this frequency the mortal oscillatory rate, or MOR, and it did no harm whatsoever to the surrounding tissues. Today, Rife's instruments use harmonics of the frequency shown on the display screen. The wavelength of the actual frequency shown, 770 megahertz or hertz, 880 hertz, etc., is too long to do the job. This principle can be illustrated by using an intense musical note to shatter a wine glass. The molecules of the glass are already oscillating at some harmonic multiple of that musical note. They are in resonance with it. Because everything else has a different resonant frequency, nothing but the glass is destroyed. There are literally hundreds of trillions of different resonant frequencies, and every species and molecule has its very own. It took Rife many years, working 48 hours at a time, until he discovered the frequencies which specifically destroyed herpes, polio, spinal meningitis, tetanus, influenza, and an immense number of other dangerous disease organisms. In 1934, the University of Southern California appointed a special medical research committee to bring terminal cancer patients from Pasadena County Hospital to Rife's San Diego laboratory and clinic for treatment. The team included doctors and pathologists assigned to examine the patients, if still alive, in 90 days. After the 90 days of treatment, the committee concluded that 86.5% of the patients had been completely cured. The treatment was then adjusted, and the remaining 13.5% of the patients who responded within the next 4 weeks, the total recovery rate using Rife's technology was 100%. On November 20th, 1931, 44 of the nation's most respected medical authorities honored Royal Rife with a banquet billed as the end to all diseases at the Pasadena estate of Dr. Milbank Johnson. But by 1939, almost all of these distinguished doctors and scientists were denying that they had ever met Rife. What happened to make so many brilliant men have complete memory lapses? It seems that the news of Rife's miracles with terminal patients had reached other ears. Remember our hypothetical question at the beginning of this report. What would happen if you discovered a cure for everything? You are now about to find out. At first, a token attempt was made to buy out Rife. Morris Fishbein, who had acquired the entire stock of the American Medical Association by 1934, sent an attorney to Rife with an offer you can't refuse. Rife refused. We many may never know the exact terms of this offer, but we do know the terms of the offer Fishbein made to Harry Hoxsey for control of his herbal cancer remedy. Fishbein's associates would receive all profits for 9 years, and Hoxsey would receive nothing. Then, if they were satisfied that it worked, Hoxsey would begin to receive 10% of the profits. Hoxsey decided that he would rather continue to make all the profits himself. When Hoxsey turned Fishbein down, Fishbein used his immensely powerful political connections to have Hoxsey arrested 125 times in a period of 16 months. The charges, based on practice without a license, were always thrown out of a court, but the harassment drove Hoxsey insane. But Fishbein must have realized that this strategy would backfire with Rife. First, Rife could not be arrested like Hoxsey for practicing without a license. A trial on trumped-up charges would mean that testimony supporting Rife would be introduced by prominent medical authorities working with Rife, and the defense would undoubtedly take the opportunity to introduce evidence such as the 1934 medical study done with USC. The last thing in the world that the pharmaceutical industry wanted was a public trial about a painless therapy that cured 100% of the terminal cancer patients and cost nothing to use but a little electricity. It might give people the idea that they didn't need drugs. And finally, Rife had spent decades accumulating meticulous evidence of his work, including film and stop-motion photographs. No different tactics were needed. The first incident was the gradual pilfering of components, photographs, film, and written records from Rife's lab. The culprit was never caught. Then, while Rife struggled to reproduce his missing data in a day when photocopies and computers were not available, someone vandalized his precious virus microscopes. Pieces of the 5,682-piece universal microscope were stolen. Earlier, an arson fire had destroyed the multi-million-dollar Burnett lab in New Jersey, just as the scientists were preparing to announce confirmation of Rife's work. But the final blow came later, when police illegally confiscated the remainder of Rife's 50 years of research. Then, in 1939, agents of a family which controlled the drug industry assisted Philip Hoyland in a frivolous lawsuit against his own partners in the Beam Ray Corporation. This was the only company manufacturing Rife's frequency instruments. Rife was not a partner. Hoyland lost, but his assisted legal assault had the desired effect. The company was bankrupted by legal expenses, and during the Great Depression, this meant that commercial production of Rife's frequency instruments ceased completely. And remember what a universal cure meant to hospitals and research foundations. Doctors who tried to defend Rife lost their foundations, grants, and hospital privileges. On the other hand, big money was spent ensuring that doctors who had seen Rife's therapy would forget what they saw. Almost no price was too much to suppress it. Remember that. Today, treatment of a single cancer patient averages over $300,000. It's big business. Thus, Arthur Kendall, the director of the Northwestern School of Medicine, who worked with Rife on the cancer virus, accepted almost $250,000 to suddenly retire in Mexico. That was an exorbitant amount of money in the Depression. Dr. George Dock, another prominent figure who collaborated with Rife, was silenced with an enormous grant along with the highest honors the American Medical Association could bestow. Between the carrots and the sticks, everyone except Dr. Kush and Dr. Milbank Johnson gave up Rife's work and went back to prescribing drugs. To finish the job, the medical journals, support almost entirely by drug company revenues and controlled by the AMA, refused to publish any paper by anyone on Rife's therapy. Therefore, an entire generation of medical students graduated into practice without ever once hearing of Rife's breakthroughs in medicine. The magnitude of such an insane crime eclipses every mass murderer in history. Cancer picks us off quietly, but by 1960, the casualties from this tiny virus exceeded the carnage of all the wars America ever fought. In 1989, it was estimated that 40% of us will experience cancer at some time in our lives. In Rife's lifetime, he had witnessed the progress of civilization from horse and buggy travel to jet planes. In that same time, he saw the epidemic of cancer increase from 1 in 24 Americans in 1905 to 1 in 3 in 1971 when Rife died. He also witnessed the phenomenal growth of the American Cancer Society, the Salk Foundation, and many others collecting hundreds of millions of dollars for diseases that were cured long before in his own San Diego laboratories. In one period, 176,500 cancer drugs were submitted for approval. Any that showed favorable results in only 1/6 of 1% of the cases being studied could be licensed. Some of these drugs had a mortality rate of 14 to 17%. When death came from the drug, not the cancer, the case was recorded as a complete or partial remission because the patient didn't actually die from the cancer. In reality, it was a race to see which would kill the patient first, the drug or the disease. The inevitable conclusion reached by Rife was that his lifelong labor and discoveries had not only been ignored, but probably would be buried with him. At that point, he ceased to produce much of anything and spent the last third of his life seeking oblivion in alcohol. It dulled the pain and his acute awareness of half a century of wasted effort ignored, while the unnecessary suffering of millions continued so that a vested few might profit. And profit they did, and profit they do. In 1971, Royal Rife died from a combination of Valium and alcohol at the age of 83. Perhaps his continual exposure to his own Rife frequencies helped his body endure abuse for so many years. Fortunately, his death was not the end of his electronic therapy. A few humanitarian doctors and engineers reconstructed his frequency instruments and kept his genius alive. Rife technology became public knowledge again in 1986 with the publication The Cancer Cure That Worked by Barry Lines and other material about Royal Rife and his monumental work. There is a wide variation in the cost, design, and quality of the modern portable Rife frequency research instruments available. Costs vary from about $1,200 to $3,600, with the price being no legitimate indicator of the technical competence in the design of the instrument or performance of the instrument. Some of the most expensive units have serious technical limitations and are essentially a waste of money. At the other extreme, some researchers do get crude results from inexpensive, simple, unmodified frequency generators, but this is just as misguided as spending too much money. Without the proper modifications, the basic frequency generator gives only minimal and inconsistent results. Please recall that the actual destruction of the viruses and bacteria, etc., is not accomplished by the frequency displayed on those cheap generators, but by certain shorter harmonics of that particular frequency, which are often blocked by the crudity of a cheap and rudimentary instrument itself. This very problem led Rife to ultimately abandon the ray tube design in favor of today's version. The newer technology applies the frequencies and their harmonics to the body through the use of handheld footplate or stick-on electrodes. Proper frequency exposure and flushing of the body with large amounts of clean, pure water is critical to achieve the kind of results Rife got. These procedures are fully explained in the manuals of the best units on the market. Now, one thing right there I want to bring up, clean, pure water. I would imagine that this technology would be even more powerful with drinking Kangen water because of the fact that Kangen water is electric in its own right, and it holds that negative electrical charge, which I would imagine would make these frequency things, you know, this technology even more powerful. But like he says right here, the flushing of the body with large amounts of clean, pure water. Pure water, that's what Kangen water is. All other water is really not clean and pure at all, even if it is clean. So unless you would be satisfied with sporadic results for minor conditions, it is suggested that use only the highest quality equipment and only the proper proven procedures in your personal research. If you do, you may discover that nothing can approach what can be achieved through the application of these safe, time-tested frequencies, many for over 65 years, and all without drugs, surgery, or radiation. One day, the name of Royal Raymond Rife may ascend to its rightful place as the giant of modern medical science. Until that time, his fabulous technology remains available only to the people who have the interest to seek it out. While perfectly legal for veterinarians to use to save the lives of animals, Rife's brilliant frequency therapy remains taboo to orthodox mainstream medicine because of the continuing threat it poses to the international pharmaceutical medical monopoly that controls the lives and deaths of the vast majority of the people on this planet. Woo! Freaking brutal stuff right there, kids. What'd you guys think of that? Man, hey, Mark Michelish, you're saying this technology is amazing, that you've used it with great success. Look into this. Combined with Kangen water, you'll be like a new person. Mark, man, I sure would love to get you on the show, because I'll tell you what, I really want to expose who this guy is. I'm gonna spend time the rest of my life trying to let people know who this incredible dude is and get his information out there to people, because cancer happens to be my biggest pet peeve in this whole wide world. And it's just disgusting to me that these people, these evil, rotten scoundrels, are able to get away with this stuff. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I want to show you guys here before we take off out of here today. I want to show you guys. I'm going to bring over here this this video from. This is something that Sam Tran sent me last night. He and I had a early morning conversation about this stuff. And this one, this is 44 minutes long, and I'll share the link to it in the comments after we're done, and you guys can go watch the whole thing if you want to. But I think just this first part of it is pretty freaking incredible, and you know, pretty amazing watching a virus implode and explode on itself. It's pretty freaking cool. So watch this. This is cool.
Here's one who, when I hit 923 hertz, with what I call the normal geometry of the plasma bulb, he suddenly, dramatically exploded, unexplainably, while some of his friends are happy as little clams. He exploded. He stopped swimming, he suddenly turned into some dramatic different shape, and he exploded. Incredible. This is a very strong blepharisma who has survived on the slide when everybody else has died. There were maybe 5 or 6 of them on there. Some died dramatic, explosive deaths. He was so tough, he was pushing debris around on the slide. I've never seen that before. It's a really tough organism. The scale is correct. We have the 10x objective. He's sort of stuck now. I think he's trying to squeeze between the cover slip and a piece of debris. He's very stubborn. So he's just stuck. I think the plasma wave is doing it. 926 hertz. He's gone through 3 programs that had effects on other organisms. Maybe we're seeing something in here. No, he still has cilia action. He is tough, tough little guy. Let's keep our
These fascinating kids, holy moly.
That's an air bubble. He's hugging. Oh, look what happened. Quite a bit of cilia stopped moving when he touched that air bubble, but he does still have directed motion. He's still going. Nope, he's still going. He cannot be stopped. He is tough. Watching carefully now. Look what happened just now. He suddenly and dramatically disintegrated 926 hertz at the end of the 3rd minute of 926 hertz. That was dramatic. He showed no sign of giving in. Now let's look very closely. The next objective, what happened to this guy? This is the 20x objective. It looks something like the other guys we've seen on the slide who just suddenly, almost inexplainably, blew up. Incredible. He suddenly turned into like 4 separate balls and exploded. Almost without warning. See that? His body's been like turned into 4 separate spheres. And here you can see the internal contents of the original organism leaking out. Oh, and here, look, it burst. It just burst open. The internal contents are leaking out through a cell wall. That was in the final seconds. And who's this coming into the picture? There's another guy coming by here. I don't know who that is or what he's doing. Let's get a little better look here. Let's go even closer. I'm going to take a chance with the 40x objective. Take a look at this destruction. Look at, you can see the contents emptying out here. He's just completely emptying out here through a hole in the cell wall. fantastic dramatic display. If I put a filter on there, maybe you see it better.
Isn't that freaking nuts, kids, huh? Holy moly.
Here's a red filter.
I'm going to go ahead and kill this, because that's enough of that one. And then I want to show you guys this one right here as well. This one is pretty freaking cool. This one's just short. It's only a minute long, but you get to watch all these things explode. Pretty freaking cool. So I'm going to bring that over to here so you guys can see it. And then I'm going to make it big, full screen it. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit play here. Look at them exploding. Boom. Wow, that was crazy cool. So anyway, yeah, there you go, kids. What a crazy gig, huh? I mean, it's just it's really mind-boggling to me that these people are able to get away with this stuff. Just absolutely mind-boggling to me. But I'm going to stop the sharing here and slide this over, and that way you guys can see me here, and I'll just talk a little bit about this. And you know, so you guys, I'll tell you, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's not being put out there that we're not getting to know about, and it's really quite tragic. And you know, the reason I put this out there is because I believe that something like this could change lives, and you know, that's our goal, is to change the world. And so, you know, hopefully you guys got some value out of this today. I know that I it just blows my mind. You know, I was up until like 1:30 this morning watching those videos. It was freaking crazy. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to show those to the Khan family in the morning. So anyway, kids, that's gonna take care of it today for me, and we're gonna go ahead and get out of here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. But you know, we are the Khan family, kids. We're here to change the world, and you know, one glass of hydrogen-rich, oxygen-saturated, incredibly hydrating, 9.5 at a time, one lightning bolt in a box, one incredible show, one amazing guest, one amazing and awesome family at a time. So that's what we're doing. We're loving it. And, you know, as usual, kids, do not forget your hugs and your hooty-hoos. Get out there, change the world, starting with your own. Love you, kids. Make it a great one.